Moving right along. John Bongard, BCom, hey? What? You'd had a long and highly successful career as a businessman. Did you know what you wanted to do when you signed up for that BCom in the late 70s?
Yeah, I kind of did, only because I'd failed before then. Because I really actually wanted to be a school teacher teaching physics and
I'd have loved
chemistry.
to have done appliances at primary school.
There wasn't much call for it. So after going through that period of my life where I wasn't that successful, then joined that wonderful company, and I was lucky that my boss's boss was Gary Peichel, and he made it pretty clear to me early on that if I didn't get my backside back to university and do something that was relevant to the business, that I would be wasting a lot of opportunity. So it was kind of clear by the time.
So you'd already begun at Fisher and Paykel?
Yes.
As a teenager.
Overseas purchasing cadet, yeah.
Oh, right. What were you doing?
I wasn't going overseas, I can tell you that.
Sounded so glamorous for a minute.
Yeah, I know, that's what I thought. I basically made cups of coffee for visitors from overseas, and I picked them up from the airport and dropped them off, and I was quite good at that.
Oh, no, someone has to do it.
Absolutely.
You grew up in South Auckland, right?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your childhood.
We had an interesting childhood in that we were basically brought up by my mum. She was a solo mum back in the 60s, which was interesting for her. It was a real challenge back then, because it seemed that if you were a solo mum in the 60s, it was absolutely your fault that the relationship didn't work. It was never the male.
The laws were certainly not on the side of women back then.
No, they weren't. But she was an inspiration, and she looked after us all.
How many?
Three of us kids. And so we lived mainly in state houses in Manaroa and Papakura till I was about 18. But we brought up, we were challenged economically. It wasn't, Christmases weren't that fantastic. But Mum sort of had this unconditional love. She gave up everything for us, and I think it's affected me all of my life, what I've done.
Were you the first generation to go to university?
Yes.
The first of your family?
Yep.
Right. So that must have meant quite a lot to her, did it?
Oh, it meant the world, yeah.
Yeah. You stayed at Fisher and Paykel for 36 years. I mean, pretty much a company man. It's not something that happens so much anymore, but I imagine it helps you. I mean, you must know every nook and cranny of that company.
Yes, I think that's the big advantage, is that, again, starting at that extremely low level in the business and working through, you got to understand the amazing culture of that business, which we inherited from the founders, from Morris and Wolf, and then Sir Don Rollins, and then Gary. The culture of that business was just incredible.
When you say culture, a lot of businesses talk about culture.
Yeah,
it's a bit of a buzzword now.
Yeah.
What was the culture you're talking about?
Well, I've always had a belief, Finlay, that if you can describe the culture of your business, you haven't got one. So, to try and describe it is really...
I'm going to use that.
Yeah, but it oozes. You breathe it. It's something very hard to describe.
It's a family company too.
Oh yes, it is. It was, yeah, and that was a great advantage, because these guys were great men, and a culture in a business, I think, takes decades to actually get to where you want to be. You can lose it in weeks, but we had that consistency from these dedicated great men.
I imagine that they weren't in it for a quick buck.
No.
It was something other than that. What were the strategic aims of Fisher and Paykel, and when you arrived, and how did that change over time? Nearly 4 decades.
It was very much a family company. It was not traded on the stock exchange or anything like that. And both Morris and Wolf were involved in the business. And I recall we didn't know how the company was going. We didn't know whether they were making money or not making money. But it didn't matter. And I know that there were years where they made no money and lost quite significantly. But they always paid a Christmas bonus. They always kept giving people salary increases. It was just that kind of business. very, very family, people-oriented. But then, of course, things change when you list on the stock exchange.
Well, you get bigger and you get more corporatised,
Yes.
and that's when the culture is challenged, right?
It is challenged, yes, and it's harder to keep it going.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially when you extend internationally into markets that you think you know, but you don't realise that you don't know them until you get there. And so you've got different nationalities with different priorities. So you have to accept that the overall culture that you have is going to, you can transport some of it, but not all of it.
Yeah. I mean, Fisher & Paykel is one of those companies like Watties in New Zealand. It's got that kind of sentimental attachment in a lot of people's lives. You kind of grew up with it. In fact, I was doing some laundry yesterday, and I was looking at our Fisher & Paykel dryer, which is actually older than our youngest child. And it's still it's a beast. It won't stop. Anyway, I digress. Is there a place for sentiment like that in business, or is it ultimately about the bottom line?
I think if your business loses sentiment and loses the relationship, which sadly I think my observation these days is somewhat lacking. I think there's been an over-adjustment to you must get a buck out of this place every quarter. It is in the US. We mercifully in New Zealand got it down to every half, but it's tricky.
Yeah. Well, you got out at the right time, but you got out in a relatively challenging way. Maybe you should tell us about that. I mean, you were really at the height of your powers, and then...
Well, I mean, you have days in your life where you realise that you're not 10 foot tall and bulletproof, and I certainly had my day of that in 2008, where I went along for what I thought was going to just be a pretty easy visit to the specialists. They said that I needed to do PSA tests and that sort of stuff, and that level had gone up. And so I went along for the test results. Everyone had told me that it was going to be okay. My wife Diane said, do you want me to come with you? And I said, no, I'll be all right, I'll be back at work. And of course, when you walk into the room with the urologist and he goes, you better sit down, you realise that there's some, there really are some issues. So I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. Carried on working through my treatments for a year.
So you probably shouldn't have done that.
Probably not.
I mean, you weren't just working. I think from what I've read, the company was going through quite a stressful time itself.
Yeah. It was a tricky time for the company. We had all sorts of debt restructuring issues. It was issues mainly around revenue, particularly out of the US, where we'd built almost $400 million business in the US, and of course when the stock exchange collapsed, the GFC came with Lehman Brothers, the high-end market in the US just flicked off, so our revenues went down, so we were having to refinance the business.
So most oncologists don't say fight your way through the global financial crisis and get better.
No.
Do they?
No, they don't. No. I got very strong advice not to carry on, but so at the back of my mind, I just didn't think it was fair to hand over where we were, because it was quite perilous at the time to somebody.
It's quite a dilemma, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. Although I soon overcame that dilemma when he said to me that you got two choices now, John. You're either going to out or really out. Yeah.
Yeah. Were you, in hindsight, typically male in that respect? You think, looking back?
Yeah. I should say at this stage, if there are any men out there that aren't getting tested regularly,
no, it's a good place for a public service announcement.
Please make sure you do.
So you obviously had to reappraise things. Did your values, your view of life, what's important, change, having had that brush with mortality?
Yeah, no, it did. It did enormously. It sort of makes you rethink your priorities in life, without a doubt. So I sort of did some soul searching and decided that life was going to be like a three-legged stool for me. So one leg was I still wanted to have some involvement in the commercial world, because I felt that I had something to offer to companies that I was interested in. And Diane and I wanted to have more time up at the beach and fishing and golfing and travelling. And then the third part was really the community side, because of my upbringing and because I'm passionate about what happens out in South Auckland. We wanted to give back there.
Tell us a little bit about the Rising Foundation that you and Diane work on.
Yeah, that's my real passion these days. But we started that up 10 years ago, so it was the year that I retired. And it basically came about because we wanted to do something for youth in Papakura, mainly, where both my wife and I have come from. But it soon kind of got out of control. And we've ended up in 5 South Auckland communities now with the program. But what kind of makes it different, without going into an hour-long monologue, which I'm sure you don't want, Finlay, is that having kind of been through the upbringing that I had, I recognise that long-term change can't happen with just small interventions, you know. And I'm not decrying what other people are doing, so please don't take me wrong, but you know, sending kids on camps for a couple of weeks over the school holidays is a great experience. But if you're taking them out of a really, really harsh environment, do that and put them straight back into a harsh environment, you're not actually adding a lot. So we wanted to start something that actually stuck with the same kids through their whole career, from intermediate school right through to the end of school, and now we're very much focused on getting them into jobs and universities and
it sounds like a full-time job.
Well, it is for Diane.
Right.
But you know, that's what I spend most of my time on these days. Yeah.
South Auckland gets a bad rap sometimes, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It's an awesome place. I've lived there virtually all my life. There's some amazing people out there and some amazing things going on.
Well, you're living proof of it. I mean, you've had your share of rewards and awards. Your list of directorships is longer than my arm. So where does this little award fit in for you?
Oh, look, it's well, I'm very humbled by it, to be honest, and you know, without being silly about it, when I got the lovely letter from the Vice Chancellor, I almost rang him up and asked him whether he was sure, you know, if you got the right guy here. Yeah,
Bongard.
Yeah, because I didn't exactly have a stellar career at university, but I got there. Yeah.
Yep, turn up, do the exams.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, thank you very much. John Bongard.
My pleasure.